Good to see you, Jake. I always call you Jake I always flip flop between calling you Jake and Wellner when we're on stream because it presents your username as your name, even though I know you as Wellner. Uh, anyways, a little pre show talk there. All right. Uh, Welcome to What the Decks, where over the course of a lunch hour, we take the idea for a deck build from Lunchbox to Deckbox. I'm your host, Skylar, and today I get to play the role of Deck Doctor. We'll be diving into a deck submitted by Andreas, who is the first person to hit the What the Decks email inbox. So I was thrilled to see that. Thank you so much for sending this deck list in. As always, I haven't really reviewed it yet. I decided at one point in time that it makes a lot of sense to kind of peek real quick, make sure there's a legal deck there, and see what pairing it is that I'm going to be working with. Obviously to prep, the go live and all that. So I know we're tackling Shadeborn today. I know we're tackling Daring Delvers. That's about it. And I'm excited that we have another warband that we get to knock off the list of warbands tackled on the show. And Daring Delvers, I don't think we've done much with it on the show. I would actually be curious if this is the only time we've done Daring Delvers. That can't be true. That's now I'm extremely curious. But we only have, so it's July now, so we only have a few more months. October is when we would expect the new box to come out for the new season. That's following Winter Maw. When that season launches and that box comes out to introduce it, we'll see all of Gnarlwood rotate out. So we're going to lose Daring Delvers. We're going to lose Tooth and Claw, Beastbound Assault, and Fearsome Fortress, all to rotation. And that'll be a first for the Nemesis environment. And I'm obviously going to miss Fearsome Fortress dearly. So I'm glad that, we're able to breathe a little more life into Gnarlwood as well with Daring Delvers here. I was, just to get this out of the way, I was sick last week. So if you were wondering where I was, that's what happened. I tried to get messages out on various Discords, and even on YouTube itself, it let me kind of post a channel update. So I wanted to let people know I was ill and unable to do the episode. But as you can see, I'm back to it. Feeling rather good. Feeling human again. So that's fantastic. Let's dive into the episode today. Dun, dun. Let's see. So, to kick off our episode, chat, I'm going to be real. I keep mixing depths and delvers up from Wellner. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I run into the same problem sometimes too. But Deadly Depths is gone. I mean, they're both DD. I think, we're kind of fortunate that we don't really run into that too much, where the abbreviations are the same as well. Daring Delvers kind of feeling more like our very first, not even just feeling that way, definitely our very first DD deck that was strictly designed for Rivals and Nemesis. Whereas Deadly Depths was, that kind of odd duck at the very end of, Nether Maze. So we have the Root Maze in the Gnarlwood, and we had the Nether Maze in Ulgu. Okay, so as we're diving into this one, what do I know about Shadeborn? So I know that they're kind of in a rougher spot than when they launched. And that's due to the fact that when they did launch, they launched in Nether Maze. And I think an argument could be made that they probably should have launched in Harrowdeep, because their core mechanic was interacting with the cover on the board. And in both Harrowdeep and Nether Maze, the cover was brought in at the beginning of the game. So when you would place objective tokens, like we do today, instead of flipping them up after we've placed them down and we can see, hey, here's where the numbers lie, that was not something you got to do when we were in the realm of Ulgu. So during Harrowdeep and Nether Maze, it was a mystery which numbers were where. And so cover was present right from the beginning of the game. You also... Is this correct? I think this is correct. I think we still Yeah, we were still placing additional feature tokens at the beginning too. So you had a cover that you could place as well. Each player was doing that. That's something that they changed when we entered Gnarlwood. So when we entered Nemesis, and it makes sense too with like the context of all the decks that we first got in Gnarlwood. Daring Delvers has ways to put the additional feature tokens in, and if they're not there, then to be put in, if they're already on the board, then those cards do nothing. Fearsome Fortress obviously kind of presents that as its thing that it gets to offer you at the beginning. And we have Plunder these days as well. But yeah, so Shadeborn come in, and a lot of their scoring and a lot of their abilities work off of cover. Now, we're going to look at their fighter cards here, and we're going to see that they tried to do a little bit of future proofing on them and say, hey, they also work with edge hexes. Yeah, so here we go. Shadow Ambush is kind of a big thing here. So when this fighter starts a charge action, and during this part, while we're looking at the fighter cards, I'm going to blow this up even further than I normally would. How's that look? There we go. We can get them all on screen. And just a little more readability here. So, Slythale, Shadow Ambush. When this fighter starts a charge action in a cover or edge hex that is not a starting hex, you can resolve the move action of the charge action by placing this fighter in another cover or edge hex. So you can leap from cover to cover or edge to edge, and frankly, you could mix that up too. Leap from edge to cover. And I believe they all inspire into Shadow Ambush. Yes, they do. So she's the only one that starts with it, but all of the elves can gain it. And as we're kind of going through their stuff, you're going to see the theme of cover come up so much more. Like the only case where it's really been future proofed is Shadow Ambush with that edge hex stuff. Whereas like the rest of the stuff doesn't have edge hexes in for like scoring purposes or other ways to future proof this warband, which is a bit of a shame. So they have a pretty difficult card pool to operate with. And as a result, I generally hear Fearsome Fortress and Daring Delvers being the best two pairings to rock with this deck. And Saxtum, Thomas of Underworld's Underground, this is one of his favorite warbands. So I'm looking forward to any follow-up opinions that I get from him, on the episode today. I'm really curious what will come up, how I handle Shadeborn in the lens of somebody who's spent a lot of time with him in Nemesis. So let's dive a little more into their stats. But yeah, no, when Gnarlwood rotates out, I'm really curious if they'll eventually like get new tools. Like will Gnarlwood leaving kind of put them in an awkward spot where they're just kind of on hold waiting for a new Universal Rivals deck that can work with them, fit with them or will one arrive with rotation and kind of fill that gap immediately. So Slythale here is the most accurate fighter in the game, like full stop. And that's, at least I think so. And that's because in the declare attack action step, pick cleave or ensnare. And this is an always on ability malleable for her Shadowstone weapons attack. This attack action has that ability until it is resolved. So cleaver and snare there. So 2 hammers, 2 damage, and your choice of cleaver and snare. So you're turning off your defense of the target unless they have guard, and then you're probably picking cleave and you're cutting through most of it. So that's pretty cool. I think they all inspire the same way. Yes. So this fighter makes an attack action that targets an enemy fighter with 1 or more wound counters. So this is an interesting element of this warband as well, where you have to first wound an enemy. So, I wonder how Rhymestorm's Bite does with them. Maybe not enough tools there to like be perfect fit, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is like a decent option for them. That's probably pretty worth exploring. But yeah, you want to get some wounds down in some way, on your targets, and then inspire off of them. So what's nice too is it's just an attempted attack. Yeah, this fighter makes an attack action that targets an enemy fighter with 1 or more wound counters. So once the damage is down on the target, anybody on your team, whether they hit or miss, that makes an attack action against them is going to be inspiring. So you can kind of create somebody that you're going to be inspiring off of. What else does she gain? So we'll see on this side here. And again, this is one of the reasons why I feel like she's so accurate. Is she goes up to 3 hammers and still gets her choice of cleaver and snare. Like, that's incredible. And she gains Grievous as well. So there's a chance that she can spike in damage. She gains flying. No, she starts with flying. You know, that's actually a thing I don't think I realized about her. Huh. That's cool. I don't think I ever once realized that she had flying. But she does. So over here, and they're all assassins too, which it would be really cool if we saw more decks that looked at assassin, brawler, hunter, priest, those keywords, and made use of them. I think it's really cool that we have them, and I wish we keyed off of them a little more. All right, so with Drusilla and I think everybody, they go up to 2 dodge. Yeah, they go up to 2 dodge once they're inspired. They're elves, so it's really rare you see them come up over 3 health. That's usually just what you have to roll with them. You're going to get some fast movement profile, usually the ability to flex into 2 defense dice, and you're usually going to sit at about 3 health. With a leader, that's generally at 4. So this is pretty typical of your elvish warbands. And let's see, let's go back a little bit. So Shadow Mark is on Valissa here, as well as Drusilla. You can reroll 1 dice in this fighter's defense rolls while this fighter is in a cover hex. Actually, that's on Sylark as well. So again, cover specifically. So I wonder if you really like on-demand guard tech. In fact, I'm confident you really like on-demand guard tech in your power, because if you can delve and maybe like that's a benefit of Fearsome Fortress, is it comes with the ability to do this on 2 fighters at once if they're in feature token positions. But you're going to be able to delve an objective, get it over to cover. That's going to cost you a stagger, and then if you can go on guard, you can flip that stagger, and now you're on 2 potentially dodge, defense, on guard, in cover with a reroll. Yeah, Fearsome Fortress kind of sounds like a blast with them. I don't know why. So I love Elvish Warbands, and I spent a little bit of time with the Daring Delvers deck with them, but maybe 1 week, maybe 2 of time out at League, and I had a blast. Their scoring was really rough. I remember that as a takeaway, but I still had a lot of fun playing them. They're just so unique, and every time I look at them, I wonder to myself why I don't play them more. So Andreas, you might have reinvigorated some need to bring these to the table on this side. What else do we have? We have Dark Lamprey here, spell action. So this is on channel, and Sylark here is a level 1 wizard. So that's going to be a 66% chance to cast, because the only results on the dice that aren't going to work are the 2 focus. So if cast, choose 1 enemy fighter within or with no wound counters within 4 hexes of the caster and or in a cover hex. Deal 1 damage to that fighter. So this could be how you kind of start getting your damage down and start figuring out who you're going to use as your inspire target. So, Wellner chiming in here, being on the receiving end of Fearsome Fortress Shadeborn at Q2. It's quite good. Oh, I believe it. That was a beautiful paint job, which if I haven't posted to the Q2 page yet, I will, like today. I had planned to post, well, here, let's look. Let's look together. So if we go to the Mortal Realms events, we have a tournament coming up, World Qualifier, and we'd love to see you there. So that's August 17th, and is a month away. But if you can come to Madison, make it happen. There's a chance at a golden ticket there, but there's also an opportunity to play with my amazing local, and we are like excited to welcome in so many players with open arms. So then Q2 was our last one. I did upload this. Perfect. Okay. So these were kind of the results of the event, including, and let's see, open image in new tab. Can I get it bigger? Yeah. This absolutely gorgeous Shadeborn right here, painted by Jimmy and represented by Jimmy as well. So that's Jimmy right here. He also won best sportsmanship. And I don't know how to pose. I was like trying to like make sure that people could be seen behind me, but that is not how to pose in the front line. You got to do something that isn't just tilting the knees. But that was an awesome event. All right, so back to the Shadeborn. So let's see, what else do we have on the inspired side? So Drusilla is gaining a scything attack and gaining some extra damage on her range 2, so that's pretty exciting. And then over here we have Ensnare gained on this range 3 attack. I think that's, I mean, outside of the defense, and the defense is a big deal, don't get me wrong. That's all I'm seeing here. And then Flurry. Oh, I missed Flurry as we were covering this. So Flurry, reaction after this fighter's successful attack action with combo, make this attack action. So we have a fighter that can attack twice. So that's Shadestalker Dagger. If this is successful, then you can follow up right here with Puncturing Follow-Up. So on this side, we see the initial attack getting Grievous. So not only do you have the chance to make a second attack, but you also have the chance to flex in some additional damage. And then on the attack with less dice, we're seeing Cleave. So I like that a lot, right? Your more dice are getting a chance at Grievous, you're more likely to crit there. And then the follow-up is, potentially able to really punch through that defense and land that final attack. What's also really nice about Velissa here, having combo available to her, is this could be how she inspires, right? So if she's lucky enough to get that first attack off, then she is making an attack action that targets an enemy fighter with 1 or more wound counters when she follows up. So she's probably the easiest one in the Warband to inspire. All right. So we've gotten to know our fighters. So let's dive into the objectives here. And so when we're doing a deck doctor, it's just my fancy dancy term for giving a review of the deck. And so what I want to do is, before I start like looking at cards that didn't make it in or adding recommendations in, we want to get a full picture. So we'll actually go column to column here instead of diving down into what is missing from the pairing, what was intentionally left out of the pairing, and then we will potentially explore that if we want to see what recommendations we can make, or take a look at some of the items that were left at home and kind of analyze why. So right out of the gate, I see that we have a glory or like an initial glory total of 17. I was going to call it a ceiling. Ceiling is what I typically call this. Man, now I'm in my head. We refer to this as so many different things, but like your glory total in your objective deck is one way to measure how well you think that you're gonna be able to do, if you think that you're gonna be able to score out your deck, right? And so like here, if we miss a 2-pointer, we're comfortably still at like 15. That feels good, because you can also add your glory gain from taking fighters out of action as well. So I want to I think if you get done building a deck and it's, we've talked about this in the show before, and it's not meeting kind of like an average glory total of 15, 16, that's a pretty healthy place to be. If it's lower than 15, then let's see. So yeah, so with 15, you can think about it this way. You have 12 cards, right? So 15 minus 12 is 3. So you have 3 cards that are offering you 2 additional, or that are offering you 2 glory instead of 1. And so that's pretty good. I think you're more comfortable at 16, where you have 4 cards that are offering you 2 glory. So we'll call 16 kind of the standard, the average that I think that you should be hitting. And then if you have lower than that, you have to be mindful of that. So if I'm at 15 or lower, then I need those cards to be incredibly reliable, and you have to spend a lot more time playing counterplay and preventing their scoring, denying their scoring, while hopefully auto scoring like your cards as they're coming out. Again, you really need that strong reliability if you're at 15 or lower. That way, because you're going to spend a lot more mental energy on trying to figure out what cards they're trying to score and denying those. Or let's say another way to look at this is if you have a really strong aggro deck and you're at 15, well, then you're going to be super focused on kills, and you're going to find denial comes naturally to an aggro strategy because you can target specific fighters that you know are part of the scoring plan based on their position or who they are, and work through them. And as you're playing that denial game of taking models off the board, you're also getting additional glory. So like an aggro 15 is a more comfortable 15 than a hold objective 15 warband. You need more than 15 in a hold objective game plan. So anyways, 17 is great to see. So I mean, some quick math here. If you assume that you have 6 cards that are giving you 2 glory apiece, that's 12, and then 6 more that are only giving you 1, that's 18. And that is kind of how we used to build in Championship. Like 18 meant you had like a perfect like scoring potential deck because you had so many cards that were giving you 2 glory, and you generally like seeing 2 glory in a surge was really rare and usually something you didn't plan on. So you had like 6 points in your surges and then 2 in each of your end phases. That's great. Or 1 end phase that's 3, and then 1 end phase that's 1. So like 18 seems to be kind of like the highest point that you're going to generally reach in a reliable objective deck. Wellner hides my note on minimum 19 or bust. Yeah, no, 19 is incredibly high to reach for. That's the more that you can get over 16. Hopefully the trade-off there from like a balancing perspective is it's getting riskier and riskier. Now, if that's still something that you can execute on, that's awesome. But traditionally, the higher this total is, then the riskier the deck is, or at least it should be. So, all right. Enough on generally speaking about glory. I think I've tried to like pull myself out of this tangent a couple times now. So, jumping up to our surges here. A vicious kill. Score this immediately after a vulnerable enemy fighter is taken out of action. Okay, so that would normally be a kill surge that I wouldn't be a huge fan of when it comes to or just in general, right? Like waiting for somebody to be vulnerable, trying to like operate on that, and then getting only 1 more damage down on them, I think is fine here because of the warband, and we have things, lot of different things that are going to kind of like chip damage at them. But if I was playing something like the Mad Mob, this would be, I don't know, initially not a preferable card. I haven't really wrapped my head around having to get a target vulnerable in a little while, like before you can surge off of them. But if they have any sort of heal, that can interrupt this. If they have any sort of damage mitigation, that can interrupt this. You're also having to look for like, okay, they have X amount of health. That means I need to hit them with this attack and this ability, or I need, like absolutely this attack to go through with Grievous. Like all of a sudden you start pleading with the dice when you're looking for specific numbers to go down so that we can get them to vulnerable. You're looking for a specific point in their health bar where normally you just need to meet or exceed, like you can exceed, their health bar to take them down. Whereas here we have to find that moment where we're just there. But I think this is going to be probably pretty good here, just with the fact that we have a lot of opportunity to um, do different varieties of damage here, as well as good options for follow-up damage from our ranged attacks. So Psylark comes to mind. Yeah, and like even Drusilla could come in with Scything later and finish the target off. But we're also looking at Daring Delvers, and Daring Delvers comes with some really good ping. And this doesn't say it has to be from an attack action. Yeah, no. So it's weird to be looking at a card like this and thinking, actually, I think this works here. Because normally I don't like fishing for that vulnerability and then risking them surviving longer. Nowhere to hide. Right, so we have, and oh, you know what, circling back to Vicious Kill real quick. So Velissa can also do really good work here, right? So Velissa could get them to vulnerability and then finish them off with follow-up, and then you don't have as much of the risk of getting a fighter to that vulnerable point. And if you're on her inspired side and she's already got Grievous, remember Grievous is a May, so you don't need to, if it's going to ruin your ability to score this, you don't need to put the damage down from Grievous on. That would be an interesting scenario, because we're talking about the difference between vulnerability or dead, then the difference of 1 damage. And so you have to make that gamble with yourself. And you have to say, okay, we're actually going to treat Grievous as a May, so that then when that fighter does die, I'm going to score a Vicious Kill, right? And then hopefully, because you're gambling with yourself here, then Puncturing Follow-Up comes through and you just get both done all at once. All right, so Nowhere to Hide, Surge, Duel. Score this immediately after a friendly fighter's attack action if the target was taken out of action and the attacker and or the defender was in a cover hex. Okay, so we have another kill surge here, but this one's going to depend on positioning. This is one of those cases where I wish the future proofing looked a little different for them and wasn't just Shadow Ambush, because it would be cool if they could use the edge hexes to help satisfy something like Nowhere to Hide. But if you can manage cover well on the board, then it's probably going to be the attacker that's doing the finishing blow from this position. Not the defender. I'm going to be shocked if we see them voluntarily hanging out in cover very much while you're playing this. So initially, I think that this is a pretty difficult card. This might be one that we look for recommendations against, but I know from what I recall, they're a very difficult warband to build for in the objective pools, especially. So this might be the best of what is left. Brave the Root Maze. Surge, score this immediately after an activation if 3 or more friendly fighters are each in a cover hex or lethal hex or on a feature token. I actually really like this card a lot. I run this with Miari's Purifiers, and I'm okay with it here. It helps you get into position for things like Shadow Ambush, and I like that feature token is agnostic in the sense that if you haven't had a chance to flip it over to cover yet, it'll still count for you while you're on the objective side. We do see fewer options in the current season with like bringing in a feature token. We're going to want it on cover anyways, an additional feature token. But if somebody else brought it in and it was a blocked hex, then that's not going to be a landing pad for us for Brave the Root Maze. But at least in that scenario, it's going to milt and come back next round. And you can put it in as cover, hopefully. So Brave the Root Maze, thumbs up for me here. We've got enough range, I think, to be managing those types of positions. And again, it's going to help set up Shadow Ambushes as well. So it's a good thing to be working towards actively as you're playing. And then Pathfinders, score this immediately after a power step if your exploration count is at least twice the round number, so 4 or more in round 2, or your exploration count is at least equal to the round number and 1 or more friendly fighters are explorers. I like this card a lot. I think that this one totally belongs. This card got way better with Plunder. The changes to Plunder. When Plunder came in originally, it was not only forgettable, but as many forget to Plunder, even today. but it was also much more restricted. You had to, if I recall correctly, you had to bring in an objective token with plunder. So the only way to really use it was if somebody had removed an objective token from the board, and then you were bringing it back into play. It's much better now that you can bring in any type of additional feature token that's hanging out off board when you get a kill. And so as they're killing, they can start putting those in. And they this is going to be, if you really want to get good at remembering plunder, this is a great warband to practice with, because it is going to work so much to your advantage to remember to plunder and get those covers in and start opening up your options for things like Shadow Ambush. And running it in a deck like this, Daring Delvers, it's also going to increase your exploration count. So if you are out there going, man, I need to be better about plunder, try this combo, try this pairing. Stealthy Advance. Score this immediately after a friendly fighter's attack action if that fighter was in a cover hex or a lethal hex or on a feature token when it made that attack action. And that fighter was not in your territory when it made that attack action. So another great card. This is one that doesn't require a success. So it's a consolation prize on a charge, as well as, still scoring if you are successful. But anytime you can say, like, I'm going to do like X and this card is going to score like regardless, then like that's a great surge. So in this case, if you miss, at the very least, you're, a glory further into the game and possibly an upgrade further into the game as well. And you've got great range 2 and 3, as well as great movement speed, 4. So at the beginning of the game, there should be plenty of spots that you have set up or are naturally present on the board for you to run into. Now notice snare hexes. Snare hexes are all the rage these days because of Hungarian Parasite. Are not included on what you can run into. They didn't have the hazard hex keyword developed yet. Like, it wasn't present in the rules. Otherwise, I think that probably would have been here. But yeah, like, just think about potential landing pad opportunities when you're putting down your objectives at the beginning of the game and when you're putting your fighters down. And then Stealthy Advance should be smooth as butter. Sudden Demise. This is really fun. Score this immediately after an enemy fight. It's fun for you. This feels good to score because it's essentially a 3 glory kill, but it's not always the funnest thing to experience, like at the table. The other individual doesn't love seeing that they were probably pinged to death for 3 damage. For 3 glory, and like sometimes that can be a feel bad for both people involved. But at this point in time, I think everybody understands that this is like part of the game and is in Daring Delvers and is something that could and probably will occur and to watch out for. Sudden Demise. Goes immediately after an enemy fighter is taken out of action by a lethal hex, usually not that. But it is there, or an enemy fighter is taken out of action by a gambit. So what type of gambits do we have that could take this out? So I'm going to guess we have a gambit attack in here. Let's see. So choose one enemy fighter in a cover or edge hex. Hey, this one's future-proofed with the edge hex thing. Deal 1 damage to the chosen fighter. So if we can drive somebody back into an edge hex position with one of our attacks, then we could potentially deal 1 damage to them after that and score a Sudden Demise. Shadestalker Darts. This attack action is from a gambit. I don't actually remember how this works from a rule standpoint. An enemy fighter is taken out of action by a gambit. I don't think this counts. Shadestalker Darts, because this is an attack action. And I think Valissa or Drusilla is considered to be the one that is doing it and is damaging. Wellner, if you're still hanging out and you want to do a little like rules lawyering for me, I'm pretty sure that Shade Stalker Darts doesn't count towards Sudden Demise, but if you check me, that'd be great. Because it's weird. Like, it is housed on a Gambit, but it's not the Gambit that's dealing the damage, it's the fighter. So unsure. I think there's an FAQ out there for that. Or like a similar case. So then what else do we have? So we've got Rippling Darkness for sure. Flame Wisps. Flame Wisps is great. Choose one friendly fighter and one enemy fighter within 3 hexes of that fighter and visible to that fighter. Roll 2 magic dice or 3 magic dice if the chosen fighter is a wizard. We do have a wizard in Sylark. If you roll 2 or more matching symbols, deal 1 damage to the chosen enemy fighter. So this is still like a good card when like, it's great. If you have a wizard and you're playing this deck, you're including this card, period. But if your wizard goes down, I've still seen this go off plenty of times. So it's not like, you know, it's got an easier chance to brick at those 2 dice, but like, it's still a pretty exciting moment for you if you need it. Grasping Rootgrave. You cannot play this in the final power step of a round. So that's something to keep in mind. This isn't your power step. This is, let's see, you cannot play this in the final power step of a round. Yeah. So like, this could be your last power step, but it's not the final power step if your opponent still has a turn after that. Coming in to help me in chat here, Wellner. I would agree with that reading, but I can't remember if Hexbane's Stake Attack has FAQs to cover that since they're more popular. Yeah. Well, let's take a look. I don't know if we're going to find our answer off of that stake. Maybe Sudden Demise? I don't think Sudden Demise is going to have... Oh, hey. Can I score this objective through damage dealt by an attack action on a Gambit? Making a point. No. So this is the Hexbane one that both Wellner and I were thinking about. Cool. All right. And this is underworlds-faq.info. I love this site. Being able to quickly look something up like that. Now I don't have to sit here in mystery. Now I know the answer. All right. So Grasping Rootgrave. Final power step. Not necessarily your final of the round. Could be the same. Might not be. But and then at the end of the action phase, deal 1 damage to each fighter adjacent to a feature token. This effect persists until the end of the phase or until another domain Gambit is played. So best time to play this is like if you went second. So then after their final activation, you play this, and now they don't have any activations to respond to it. They're like, oh no. And then you go into your final and probably move somebody out of danger because this affects both players, right? So deal 1 damage to each fighter adjacent to a feature token. Fighters that are on a feature token, totally fine, unless you have 2 feature tokens next to each other because you've been plundering or, you know, bringing them in some way, shape, or form. And then both of those feature tokens are adjacent to each other, so anybody on them are in trouble. Let's see. Wellner, I'd have done that, but am on mobile and also at work. Fun podcast. No worries at all. No worries at all. Quick Roots is another example here of ping that we have in the deck. So reaction, play this after an enemy fighter's activation. If that fighter has 1 or more move and or charge tokens, deal 1 damage to that fighter. What's really interesting about this is it doesn't matter how they got the move or charge tokens. It's just after that enemy fighter's activation. So once a fighter is like charged out, you can keep watching them for like the ideal moment to use Quick Root. So like Quick Root actually gets more powerful with the charged out rule, kind of like as the game goes on, and you start seeing fighters get more get reactivated. And you could always just do this deal 1 damage, you know, the first opportunity you get for it. But if you're holding on to it for something like you want to score a vicious kill, and you want to make sure that you can get them to that vulnerable state, like there's a little more flexibility with Quick Roots than at first glance. It is activation though, so don't kind of summarize this in your head as, oh, after they've moved, right? Because if they have like an out of sequence move action granted them by a like power card, and it's not that fighter's turn. Maybe it's another fighter's turn. Maybe you're in power. Um, like that's not going to allow you to pull this trap out. It has to be that fighter's activation strictly. So something to keep in mind there. Okay, so how many pings do we have in total that can contribute to sudden demise? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 that contribute, and then this one cannot, but this is still a great card. I would include this in this deck every time. So this is a very well supported surge, and it's worth the abundance of support because it gives you 2 glory and an additional 1 for the kill. All right. So the only surge in here that I like about for them is Nowhere to Hide. But again, that might be the best of bad options for us. I'd say if I had to pick out a second one, although I like Brave the Root Maze, it is asking a lot of a 4-fighter warband. If you do get down to 3 fighters, then it dictates their positioning holistically until you score it. And then if you're down to 2 fighters, obviously you can't score it at all. But I still really like it here. Like, again, you're working towards Shadow Ambush and Shadow Mark. You're working kind of towards your game plan when you're working towards Brave the Root Maze. So it gets a little more comfortable as a pick as a result. So in end phase here, we're looking at a Coiling Darkness for 2 glory. Duel. Score this in an end phase if 2 or more friendly fighters are in cover hexes, and 1 or more of those fighters made 1 or more attack actions in this round. So I think that's pretty reasonable. And, you know, if we're down to 2 fighters only, then we can always work on getting those attack actions. So 1 or more of those fighters made 1 or more attack actions. Oh, it's just made. We don't even have to, it's not a successful one. So you can always like get your attack action taken care of and spend, you know, your initial activations operating where you need to, and spend, you know, your charged out activations moving into position. For Coiling Darkness, this is a great card. I think that this should totally be here. Score this in an end phase if your warband made 4 or more attack actions in this round. That's Fighting in the Shade. Because again that it's made and not successful, I think that this is really good. We have somebody that can help us out with 2 of those right away with combo, and then we have Shadestalker Darts that could be a 3rd one. So, you know, then it's easy breezy. You have 3 more activations, you know, in that scenario where you can operate with your remaining 3 fighters to just make 1 more attack. Yeah, Fighting the Shade's good. Prolonging the Inevitable. Score this in an end phase if 1 or more friendly fighters are adjacent to 1 or more vulnerable enemy fighters. Now, this card is hard. It's 2 points. It's probably worth it. So let's talk about this card a little bit. So all of that nervousness that I kind of had initially with a vicious kill is like amplified 2-fold here with Prolonging the Inevitable. Like, cards like this are why I'm nervous about a card like this. I think actually a Vicious Kill is totally fine. I like it a lot. I didn't even rank it as like the, you know, number 1 or number 2 surge that I would, you know, maybe look for another pick at. Prolonging the Inevitable, you have to intentionally leave a vulnerable fighter alive for the end phase, and then you have to position next to them. And that can be really tough. So if you have a vulnerable enemy fighter on the board, you might be tempted to let them live. And that could be detrimental to your health. And then if you don't have one, then you're hoping to make one by the end of the action phase, as well as end up next to them. So best case scenario is you're going second, and you're able to charge into one of these individuals and get them to vulnerability, and then you choose not to drive them back. But that's also like not without risk, because then you've put them in a position, if they're, you know, range 1 especially, you've put them in a position where if they win roll off, they have a free attack against you without having to charge. So there's ups and downs here. The other like variable is with the charged out rule. As the game goes on, if you did not go second, you went you went first. Then they're gonna have the potential, if they suss this out, to just move away. So like even with a charged out fighter, they can just move away from this scoring position. So this card excels when you are going second, struggles immensely when you are going first, and then puts you in weird positions with vulnerable fighters where like you're intentionally keeping them alive, and that's rough. So I I'm curious what else we might be able to recommend for this slot. Sadistic tendencies. Score this in an end phase if 3 or more enemy fighters are out of action and or have 1 or more wound counters. So here, hold on one second. Sorry about that. Didn't want to burp into the mic though. All right. Sadistic tendencies. Score this in an end phase if 3 or more enemy fighters are out of action and or have 1 or more wound counters. Okay, so this is a fairly reasonable card. It's a little weird in that you have to like potentially move your damage around instead of focus it. But what I like about this card a lot is that it checks both out of action and wounded. So it doesn't penalize you for taking a fighter out. And that's good. Any card that penalizes you for taking a fighter out of action like goes down a peg. So if this had been, if 3 or more enemy fighters have 1 or more wound counters, this would be a pretty iffy pick. But because we can take them out and have them contribute to the count, it's probably going to get a pass from me. Like I think that like as in like it's okay in this slot. I'm all right with it. We have enough pings too, and ways to like kind of ping damage out, and that's not the worst thing in the world either, because then you're kind of like teeing up your targets. But it's definitely playing the game differently. Like most of the time it's more about focusing damage onto priority targets and less on spreading the damage out and leaving fighters alive, because if anytime you can focus that damage up and take a fighter out, you're removing what they can do on their turn. You're changing that equation where you are saying to them, you actually aren't well. And managing charged out is also an interesting consideration here. Sometimes you want to force like a weaker fighter to stay in the game and count against the stronger fighter's ability to get to charged out, which is not a tactic I use enough. I actually want to try to identify that more in games and keep weaker fighters counting against that charged out status. But overall, if you can remove a fighter, especially a priority target, on their team, then you've prevented or changed what they're going to have available to them on their turn. And so you're diminishing what their turns can look like. But sadistic tendencies, yeah, I'm cool with it. It's 1 point, but I don't think that we're going to get much better to fill that spot with. And I think these are both probably pretty good, reliable oneers. All right, so the Shadows Deepen. Score this in an end phase if each surviving friendly fighter is in a cover hex. So each surviving friendly, that could be 1, or 2 or more enemy fighters are in cover hexes. Likely not going to be that latter condition, but I think the Shadows Deepen is a reasonable card to bring along for the ride. I like it. I do think, if you see it in that opening hand, it weighs heavily into your mulligan considerations. You probably don't want that hand unless you have 2 banger surges. This is something that you want to see towards the end of the game when you only have 1 or 2 fighters left. Like that's the best time to see this. It's 2 points. It's worth the gymnastics. Cautious Venture. Score this in an end phase if 2 or more surviving friendly fighters are in enemy territory and your exploration count is 3 or more. So getting into enemy territory is made easier by Shadow Ambush, helping us move around the board. Exploration count of 3 is not very hard to arrive at either. The hardest part about this card is, having 2 surviving fighters at the time that you draw this. So you want to, whereas Shadows Deepen, you want to draw later. Cautious Venture, I actually think you want to draw earlier. Best time for this is round 2, but you can pull this off in round 1 if you can get like a plunder kill down. Let's see, what other ways do we have exploration? I still think that this is good though, for 2 points. So Temporary Haven, this can help us with 1. Let's see, is anything else? Plunder Knowledge can help us increase. Prospector can help us increase. Prospector is really fun. We'll talk about that when we get to it. Yeah, so like there's good ways where you could actually get like a really good hand and make that happen in round 1. Also, I'm forgetting that. Hold on, for those who aren't familiar with this pot card, because there are plenty of people that have started the game since Gnarlwood began and haven't seen Daring Delvers very much. What is exploration? So you probably picked it up by now contextually that it's something that's just increasing over time. So it's anytime you place a feature token during a round, which is what I've been focused on. And then at the end of the action phase, for each friendly fighter that is on a feature token that is not in your territory. So could be no one's, could be their territory. Feature token that you're on also increases your exploration count. So if you get a kill in round 1, that's 1. If you get 2 fighters on feature tokens not in your territory, that's 2 and 3, right? And you need them not in your territory because that's where they need to be to help you score Cautious Venture. So specifically in this case, they need to be in enemy territory. So yeah, very doable in round 1. And then at the end of the action phase, for each surviving friendly explorer that is not in your territory is another way to do it. So if you have 1 fighter over the line and they have an explorer upgrade on and they're on a feature token, then that 1 fighter is actually getting you an exploration count bump of 2. And this is one of the best parts about this block card, is the decrease your exploration count happens after scoring. So you get your additions, your increase before scoring, you get your decrease after scoring. At the end of the round, for each enemy fighter that is on a feature token that is not, enemy fighter that is on a feature token that is in your territory, they will decrease the count. But this doesn't really happen, or like this doesn't add up to much of a meaningful impact to you. This is usually like pretty easy to overcome, but it is there for your opponent. And the reason it's easy to overcome is because you have the whole action phase to work on your increase, and then again the decrease is only happening at the end of a round, so it's happening going into round 2 and going into round 3. It's not even happening at end game scoring. Exploration when you're working towards it is pretty achievable in general, I feel. Now there is a surge out there for those who aren't familiar for 3 points. Let's load this pairing. I haven't actually loaded this in yet. Nemesis, Shadeborn, and I always forget the name of this one, so I won't pretend I totally remember the name because I'm blanking on it. I always blank on this. I can see it though, Vortimus in a circle in my head. So what do we have? We have Daring Delvers. There we go. It's a Daring Delvers card. Uncovered Secrets. There it is. Scrolls immediately after a power step if your exploration count is 10 or more. That is hard. That is very difficult. There are like only a couple warbands out there that can really consider this. The primary one being Zandar's Gravebreakers, which is hilarious and awesome. And that because every time the zombie grave breaks, one of the zombies grave break, they're placing the objective token or the feature token. And therefore, because the keyword is place there, it's increasing your exploration. So they can just be explorers in their own territory, grave breaking, which is really fun. And the other one that I've messed around with is Gnarl Spirit Pack, because they can blow up tokens, and then hopefully bring them back in as well. So they're one of the only, if not the only, I think Rothgorn can as well. So they're one of the only ones in the game that can actually remove objective tokens like inherently, and so that kind of helps them be able to have more supply to bring back in with placements. So you could do a mad scientist Gnarl Spirit Pack build with uncovered secrets. I know because I have, and I have scored this card that way. It was fun. It was meme worthy though. It was not competitive, that's for sure. So overall, we like the objectives here, and we'll be looking for maybe a couple of surge considerations. Mostly, if we couldn't give Nowhere to Hide a better slot in, and then Prolonging the Inevitable would be one I'd want to see if we couldn't pull out of this build for another. All right, so then on to Gambits and upgrades. So Gambits, we've already gone over 5 of these cards, right? We've already gone over Quick Roots, Grasping Rootgrave, Flame Wisps, and Rippling Darkness. So that's the first 4. So we won't go over those. The 5th one was Shadestalker Darts. I kind of glanced over this one, but as you can see here, you're getting a range 3 attack with 3 swords, 1 damage. This is from Drusilla or Valissa. And it's actually restricted here at the bottom, which is awesome because you're going to be able to salvage this if it's not applicable anymore. But hopefully it is. Hopefully you're going to be able to make an attack with one of these 2. But if not, at least you're going to be able to draw a replacement card. So what other 5 Gambits do we have brought along? And I think having 5 damage, oh my gosh, or more with something like Grasping Rootgrave in the Gambits is, explosive and belongs in this deck. So Impenetrable Darkness. Give each friendly fighter with no move or charge tokens 1 shadow counter. So you want to draw this at the beginning of a round. You don't want to draw into this because then it's going to reduce who's going to be able to get shadow counters. Fighters with 1 or more shadow counters treat the hex they're in as a cover hex. That's awesome. In addition to other hex types. So if it's a starting hex, you still won't be able to shadow ambush off of it. It's now a cover, sure, but you're not able to jump out of starting hexes. So it'll retain that as one of its other types. Discard all shadow counters at the end of the phase. So that means when we're done with the action phase, as we're going into scoring, we have to discard these. So you're not going to be able to count on or remove. Does it say discard? I don't normally see discard tokens or counters. You see remove counters, but same. So you're not going to have these counters assisting you with any sort of like cover scoring. So keep that in mind. I mean, it makes sense too, because like this could potentially just give all of you cover and then instantly score you the Shadows Deepen. So obviously they don't want to do that. But this does amp up your round. Like this is a super round for you when you draw into this. It really opens up the field. And then let's see, Shadow Binding. Choose 1 friendly fighter with 1 or more wound counters. Heal 1, the chosen fighter. Heal 2, the chosen fighter instead if the chosen fighter is in a cover hex. I think this is a great heal. Most of the time you're going to be able to find a way to get that heal 2 off, and that's your average attack. So if you're at a 3 wound total, you've taken 2 damage from your average attack in the game, and you want to top back up to full and no longer be vulnerable. Shadow Binding you there. That's fantastic. This show has probably single-handedly turned me around on heals. Like I used to dislike running them. I used to dislike seeing them across the table. And I think the only place I really liked seeing heals was the game used to, after your activation, give power priority to your opponent. So your opponent would go first in power if you had just activated, and vice versa. So that meant if I was vulnerable at the end of an activation where I was just attacked and made vulnerable, I had the ability to respond to taking that damage by playing a ploy to heal myself, and then I'd pass over to my opponent, and they'd be like, oh shoot, I have a one damage ping in my hand, but he was able to heal up. So I'm going to keep that quiet to myself, and I'll have to use this later, but at least I pulled the heal out, and I really liked that. And so I've been more sour on heal ever since, I guess. But it still wasn't a mechanic that I ever like spent the card slots on. And then I played Bloodthirsty Hosts, the vampire deck that we built together. And that one, there's so much healing in that deck. You can heal a total of 4, if I recall correctly, off the top of my head. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. Malefic Siphon, Blood Vial, and the upgrade from Hungering Parasite that can heal you too. So that's wild. And I've done a lot of healing as a result, and it has won me over on how much of an impact it can have on a game. Even with smaller fighters. Like, I used to kind of think healing was like a big fighter only thing. But no, like being able to come back after an average attack is so big. Like, you've now said, no, it's not going to take, an attack and a card that you draw eventually to take me down, or 2 attacks. It's going to take 3 attacks, or another attack and then a card later. So yeah, like it a lot. Smoke and Mirrors. Choose 2 friendly fighters, one or more of which is in a cover hex. Place each fighter in the hex that was occupied by the other fighter when you chose them. So what's cool about this as well, this is just great, right? If you've been playing around with Sudden Swap and Hungering Parasite, you know how good this can be. And here, again, Impenetrable Darkness, you're kind of seeing how much this can do, right? Like, this can be what makes Shadow Binding heal 2 instantly. It can allow all of your fighters to be in swappable positions for Smoke and Mirrors. Even if they're on starting hex, or like one of them's on a starting hex, you use Smoke and Mirrors, all of a sudden one of them's not on a starting hex that your opponent had registered was. They weren't available to Shadow Ambush, now they are. So Impenetrable Darkness is doing just so much. It's also enabling Shadow Mark as soon as it's out. Yeah, really great. So Smoke and Mirrors, also really cool, and really good for all the position shenanigans we're going to want to be doing with our fragile fighters. And then Vanish into the Gloom. Choose 1 friendly fighter with no charge tokens. Place the chosen fighter in an empty cover hex and give that fighter 1 charge token. So 1 friendly fighter with no charge tokens. Place the chosen fighter in an empty cover hex. So Impenetrable Darkness isn't boosting this because it can't just decide that wherever you're landing is cover. It will become cover, but it isn't when you're selecting it. So into an empty cover hex and give that fighter 1 charge token. If the chosen fighter was in a cover hex when you chose them, give the chosen fighter 1 move token instead. Okay, and so there's where something like Impenetrable Darkness can come in as well. Is it a May? Give the chosen fighter a move token instead. Okay, interesting, because the charge token could be a total benefit. I like this card a lot. This is going to help enable scoring. This is going to help enable something like, technically it could help with prolonging the inevitable. I don't really think that's going to be the case. We're talking about making sure that a vulnerable fighter is next to a cover hex so that we can then vanish into the gloom to be next to them. It could happen. Like, I'm not saying it won't happen. Like, there are going to be games where that's true. But most of the time, this is going to help with things like the Shadow Deepens or Coiling Darkness. And to be able to help us score 2 of our 2-pointers, as well as all the other utility this has along with it. This is really great. I like this a lot. So, last one is Temporary Haven. Pick 1, place 1 available feature token in a hex occupied by a friendly fighter not in your territory. So you have to have left your territory. But then you can put this underneath you. It can be a cover hex. Or increase your exploration count by 1 if 1 or more friendly fighters are each on a feature token not in your territory. So this card is great. It's going to help enable a whole bunch of scoring. It's going to help enable Cautious Venture, The Shadows Deepen, Coiling Darkness. Yes, this is great. It's also going to help with Pathfinders or Brave the Root Maze. Yeah, with all the different tricks that we have to be in cover hexes, Also really amps up how good Brave the Root Maze can be in this deck. Yes, again, you're looking for it in the earlier stages of the game, but I think there's gonna be games where this just scores. Like, you know, you have these two, Brave the Root Maze and Impenetrable Darkness, in your opening hand. Awesome. Like, you're just gonna score that. um, cool, cool. Okay. I don't really have any notes on the gambits. I don't like. I'm not bringing to mind any gambits from either side of this pairing that I think should be in here, and I'm not seeing any that I think it shouldn't be. I think this is really strong, and let's take a look at the upgrades. So, Abyssal Guidance, you can re-roll 1 attack dice in attack actions made by this fighter if this fighter is in a cover hex. 1 attack dice in... Okay, cool. So, an offensive reroll from when you're in cover, again, boosted by something like Impenetrable Darkness. Aided by Darkness, +1 damage to this fighter's range 1 and range 2 attack actions if the attacker and or target is in a cover hex. So range 1 and range 2 means you're going to have to be really close to your target, but still, this is totally a card that you bring. Absolutely. And then Dusk Lure Bracers reaction. Use this after this fighter is dealt damage while in a cover hex. After this fighter is dealt damage while in a cover hex. Okay. After the deal damage step, choose an enemy fighter within 2 hexes of this fighter. Deal 1 damage to the chosen fighter. Alright, so this could even be on your way out. This fighter is like dying, and we'll still get the ability to react with this and get that damage off. That's rude. That seems good. Ruthless Aim. +2 dice. Can you see why this warband was like pretty crazy in a time where like the game started with 6 cover hexes, 6 more than you see at the start of a game today. Like, dang. All right. So instead of having to like run around and flip tokens for yourself, it was the enemy that had to run around and flip tokens to prevent those from being spots for you for later. So it was like it was backwards from how it is today. All right, Ruthless Aim, +2 dice to this fighter's attack actions if the target is vulnerable. Fantastic. Reaction, use this after this fighter's attack action takes an enemy fighter out of action. Give this fighter 1 shadow counter. Fighters with 1 or more shadow counters treat the hex they are in as a cover hex, in addition to other hex types. Discard all shadow counters at the end of the phase. So Ruthless Aim is going to be integral, key, like fantastic to making a lot of this stuff work for you mid-round. This is an awesome card because of this reaction here. It's man, it's locked behind a kill. This is still good. We're already looking for a vulnerable fighter with Vicious Kill. I think vulnerability is just going to happen. I mean, it doesn't always come up in games, but in a lot of games it does come up, right? And so to be able to say, I'm going to get 2 dice against that attack, and to have no range limitations on this either, you're very likely going to get that kill. In fact, yeah, you can boost Shade Stalker darts up to 5. That's pretty crazy. So I like the vulnerability, like disadvantage that you're posing to your opponent, or your advantage against vulnerability, if you want to view it that way, as well as obviously essentially like a walking wall enabler, but one that is locked behind a reaction. That's cool. I like it. Voidling. Rolls of single support are successes in this fighter's attack rolls for attack actions that target a fighter adjacent to or in a cover hex. Adjacent to, ooh. So you could be your own, you could be your own cover hex that they are adjacent to if you have Ruthless Aim already go off or Impenetrable Darkness on you. So during those moments, you're going to have easy access to those single support successes, and then rolls of single support are successes in this fighter's defense rolls if this fighter is adjacent to or in a cover hex. All right, and so that's going to be easier for you to control than the first one, and is going to boost your defense. That's pretty great. You got this little voidling, creepy little voidling, helping you out there. Oh, you know what? I've had. Sorry, hold on. Yeah, normally, normally we're at 125% browser view. It hasn't actually mattered too much now until we're on this upgrade side. So all these upgrades have been, cut off for individuals that have been wanting to read along. So sorry about that. And so we were at 150. Yeah, we were at 150% when we were looking at the fighters earlier, and I never knocked it back down. Um, so let me know. Should I? I mean, 150% doesn't bother me too much, especially during a deck doctor. It's a little in your face, when we're getting down here and we're looking at cards individually. So I guess that's kind of my answer. Is I definitely want this section to be at 125, and this is where we'll spend a lot of time during like a build episode. But yeah, so if you were wondering why things were blown up a little bit, it's just because I never brought it down from when we were looking at fighters. And, when we're looking at objectives and gambits, the cards only shifted a little bit and still on screen, so that works well. But when we're over here on this right side looking at upgrades, it'll definitely cut them off the screen. We're on to 9 lives here. This fighter is an explorer. When this fighter would be dealt damage by a gambit or a lethal hex, roll 1 magic dice. On a roll of channel, this fighter is not dealt the damage. So when this fighter would be dealt damage by gambit or a lethal hex, roll 1 magic dice. So this is just really fun, especially with the amount of ping that's in the game. A lot of people refer to it as, with where the meta is at. I don't know personally if the meta itself is like full tilt ping. I don't think so. That's not my experience with it. Is ping strong, and is it prevalent across the card pool? Yeah. Like it's in most decks, right? And then some decks are glut with it. Daring Delvers being one of them. But oh, hold please. I have a service appointment. They are early. I will be right back. All right. Sorry about that. It's better to have a service appointment earlier than you expected. I mean, than later, right? I think if I had to pick one of the two, like, I mean, within the window, definitely preferable, but uh, hey, at least things are working out. It wasn't like a they couldn't make it, or we're gonna be late and you're gonna be late to whatever you wanted. No, so if I had to pick one or the other, I think earlier better than later. So where were we? We were on Nine Lives. We're talking about the meta, and I would just say, like, yeah, there are a number of cards in the game that can deal damage, and a lot of them are housed in well, I mean, in universals and in warbands, and anytime you get a pairing that's bringing a concentration of the two, that can be like a lot to manage. Nine Lives could be a really fun way to manage that. Yes, it's a dice roll, but whenever it works, it's going to feel fantastic. And this fighter is an explorer. So what it's also doing is it's also helping your exploration count and any of the objectives that we have, working towards that. So, when you look at some of these and you think, like, there's probably an amount of explore I should bring along for the ride to, like, help secure scoring. There's almost a point where you could be like, I would probably take an upgrade that just says this fighter is an explorer. Now, not the best upgrade in the world, but if it's helping with scoring, that can make or break a game. And so when it also does something else, even if that is on a dice roll, that that feels good. And this is a cool thing to have at your hands. So I haven't played around with Nine Lives too much myself, but it's one of those cards that I've always wanted to mess around with. It is a 50-50, when we're looking at that channel roll. So, anytime somebody's trying to take you down with gambits or even push you into lethals, which is less likely to come up, you're going to be able to go for 50-50s. One of the fun things, sometimes I put myself in positions where it's like, oh crap, I can actually only make it to that position if I run through this lethal. Nine Lives could apply in that scenario as well. So, okay, Plundered Knowledge. After this fighter's activation, in which its attack action took an adjacent target out of action, pick one, increase your exploration count by 2, or draw 2 power cards. So the adjacent piece is something to, like, strongly keep in mind here. And I personally like this more for the draw 2 cards, but being able to put your explore count up by 2 is really good as well. So an adjacent target out of action. These days, this is essentially saying if there's an additional feature token available, you've actually increased your exploration by 3 off of 1 kill. So that's pretty nuts. This was part of the meme build for the Gnarl Spirit pack I'd mentioned earlier. But a card that says, hey, after a kill, as long as you're adjacent to them, draw 2 cards, that's a card that I'm probably always going to include if I think I'm going to be aggressive enough to support it. So I like seeing it here. You have a lot of really good tools that you're going to want to be able to draw into. And less redundancies too. Like you have redundancies over here in ping, but you don't mind drawing another ping. So like some games or some decks, like you build in this redundancy, and that kind of almost serves as like your stand-in for card draw. Is like, it's okay, I have like 2 of these in the deck, I just need to get 1. So you have a better chance at seeing them. All of a sudden that chance is 1 out of 10 instead of 1 out of 20. Whereas we don't see a lot of duplicates in here, and we really want to find Impenetrable Darkness, and we really want to find Ruthless Aim, cards like that. And so Plunder Knowledge can help make that happen. So Prospector, this fighter is an explorer, so already helping with our exploration there. But this card helps exploration a ton because reaction after this fighter's activation, place 1 available feature token within 1 hex of this fighter. So it could be next to them, could be occupied next to them, right? Place. Oh, nope, I'm thinking of a different card. Ha! Sorry. But after this fighter's activation, place 1 available feature token. So if there's 1 off the board, Uh, that's why this was a bigger deal for my Gnarl Spirit build, is because I was blowing them up. But then a fighter with Prospector, after they activated, could just bring it back in. But place one available feature token within one hex of this fighter, then give this fighter one charge token. So you could, playing this deck, go on guard with that fighter as their activation, bring in a cover hex underneath them, and you're charged. And that could be really big. Like maybe you wouldn't have been able to get to a charge position otherwise, and all of a sudden your warband is now charged out, allowing you further activations from there. But you're also probably pretty immovable now, and you're on a cover, which is going to be a pretty important scoring position for you. So Prospector makes a lot of sense here. And then Rapid Fire, reaction after this fighter's activation in which they made a repeater handbow attack action. They make another repeater handbow attack action. So this is for Psylark. I love cards like this. There's one of these in the Wild Hunt for Althane, and I bring it in every build. And then you don't have to bring one in Mad Mob because they kind of do it naturally at the cost of a charge token. So usually, like if you don't see something like that where it costs them something inherently on their card to do it, a lot of archers in the game will have a second shot ability, or a second shot upgrade restricted specifically to them that you can pick up and include in the deck. So not only is this great for being able to put down more damage, being able to inspire, like if you get a glory off of somebody else, you have this in hand, give it to him, he shoots once, gets a damage now, and shoots again, all of a sudden he's inspired now. But it also goes towards your attack action counts. I've lost my train of thought there. There was something more I was going to say about it. I guess just like cards like this used to feel risky, and they don't anymore. I don't think that was the point. But the salvageability on something like this is really great too if you get it late. But you can also push people around a little bit more if you need to get them into specific positions. This is going to allow you more chances at knocking them back, and more chances at a vicious kill, more chances at getting your coiling dark. Nope, fighting in the shade. Anyways, I think we've covered this card in full. All right, on to the next. I think I was just jumping through some hoops there, running around in circles. Speaking of circles, Conqueror's Circlet, +1 move. I ran downstairs, got everything going. My wife just got home too, so she was able to kind of like take over the service appointment, and then I ran back up. And I need to work out more. I'm out of breath. Conqueror's Circlet, +1 move. Each other friendly fighter's move characteristic is equal to this fighter's move characteristic. So this is leader restricted. This is an interesting card to see here because you have Shadow Ambush, which could give you some crazy movement across the board. I don't know if you need move 5 on anybody. I don't think there's a scoring reason for it. It's really cool, right? If you put this on Slythale, then all of a sudden everybody's at range 5 or move 5, and that can help you get more adjacent attacks maybe. But you do have really good ranged options for the most part outside of Alyssa. So, not sure about Conqueror's Circlet. It doesn't make you an explorer either. We might be able to find something different for this slot. I just can't draw a line from this to anything else. So we might consider that a little different. I guess what this could do is if they know you're playing Daring Delvers and you want to get over to their territory and sit on their tokens, flip those into cover, they might be more likely to try to pull those back and make that a little harder for you to reach. So maybe it's mostly for that, to be able to just reach the feature tokens that are in enemy territory. But I'm not sure. So I think what we could see instead here is there's a card. let's go take a look at their upgrades. So we're on to the point where we can make recommendations. We got a good picture of this deck. Objectives, 2-3 cards in here maybe that we want to look at. Gambits feels really tight. I think I'd have a hard time pushing anything in here. I wish that we did have some sort of push that we could recommend. I'm struggling to remember if there are any available to us. We're going to take a look at that. And then in upgrades here, I think Conqueror Circlet's probably the only thing. I could see Abyssal Guidance potentially, just because it's only coming up when we're in cover. However, I still like having a reroll on attacks dice without any restrictions here too on like how far away or what your range is really good. All right, looking at upgrades here. Let's see. +1 wizard level for Amulet of Gathering Darkness here. And a spell action, if cast, choose one friendly fighter within 3 hexes of this fighter. Give that fighter 1 shadow counter. Fighters with 1 or more shadow counters treat the hex they're in as cover hex in addition to other types. Discard all shadow counters at the end of the phase. This is cool. I don't think this is enough. You don't really need that wizard level for much. And that spell action, it would be better if that somehow persisted across round. Like which they wouldn't do because they want like shadow counters to feel like persisting, or they want them to feel the same. Like across any cards that are offering you shadow counters, they want to make sure, I'm sure, that they all function the same, that there isn't a card that makes cover or a shadow counter work, any different. Be cool if it was like, hey, this fighter gets a shadow counter, or like put a shadow counter on this card, it won't be removed at the end of the round, or something like that. That would be really cool. But that's not the case, so I think we can pass on that card. Masks of Shadowed Mirrors, -1 damage from attack actions that target this fighter to a minimum of 1 if the attacker is adjacent to this fighter. Scythail only. The Scythail only would probably see this out of my deck, as well as the adjacency. As soon as you put this down, like it's not the easiest thing to navigate around, but a lot of times it can be navigated around with ranged attacks and stuff like that. It can be really strong though. Definitely a card I'd test, but I don't think this makes it in over Circlet. I don't think it's making a strong enough case on its own. Shadewalker, +1 move and flying. I don't think we need that. Like we're already thinking about getting rid of a card that gives +1 move to everybody. Umbral Glaive, range 3, 3 hammers, Grievous 1. After making this attack action, break this card. So whether it was successful or not, you only get 1 shot with this. It's Drusilla specifically. Is that the only range for Drusilla? No, it's Felissa that's our short range fighter. I see, it's her spear that we'd be throwing. Nah, I don't think we really need that. Okay, let's see. All-terrain gear. This fighter is an explorer, +1 move, +2 move instead while a domain is persisting. We're not really leaning into persisting domains. Claim Jumper. This fighter is an explorer. Fighters adjacent to this fighter cannot be given guard tokens or be on guard. That could be good. Like just to make sure, well, fighters adjacent to this fighter cannot be given guard tokens or be on guard. You wouldn't really want to accidentally like hurt yourself this way, because it's not just enemy fighters. But for when you're going up against an enemy fighter with a guard token, you can turn that off. Probably doesn't come up enough. Dousing Limb. Dousing Limb is something that I was considering as like a potential card to include. So after this fighter's activation, scatter 2 from this fighter's hex and push this fighter up to 2 hexes along the chain. And so what you'd be looking for here is like, let's say you need to get to a feature token because you need it to be, you need to get onto cover or what have you, and they are on it. Then you can hit them and then use Dousing Limb's reaction here to hopefully get onto the position. Dousing Limb was a little better when they had push as 0 as something that you could still do, whereas now push is a mandatory like minimum of 1, and so you would have to take at least one of the results. and so that could put you maybe in a worse position. So Dousing Limb, like, is probably less desirable these days, but you do get 2 dice to look for hammers essentially, like, and say like, hey, I want to move forward. So that's something we could consider. Enshrouded Shot. He shrugs unconfidently. Enshrouded Shot. This fighter can only make this attack action while on a feature token. We got a range 4 attack now. This could be really good. I actually like this a lot. I think I like this a lot more than Conqueror's Circlet, because we could give this to like Valissa if she was alive, and she could still do stuff at range. Plus it can potentially do 2 damage, and it opens up our positioning a little bit. It says like, hey, even if there's a fighter that's 3 away from where we want to be, if that's a feature token that we want to be on, all of a sudden it can be 4 away instead. I think I probably strongly recommend this over Conqueror Circlet. I think I like this a lot. But so I'm gonna hit add for now, and then final say reaction: after a gambit is played that chooses one or more friendly fighters, give this fighter 1 charge token and break this card. When you do, that gambit is not resolved. So Baconborn has done an article on Final Say. It's on the Path to Glory blog, so if you want to go check that out, do so. If you want to learn more about Final Say, it's a really fun think piece. Final Say has been a card that has been on my brain ever since it came out, for a couple different reasons. One, the fact that it can cancel a gambit potentially is pretty crazy, and the fact that it could give a charge token was something that I wanted to potentially entertain, especially with Skate's Wild Hunt, because anytime I see give a charge token, they're the first thing that comes to mind. But Final Say, in my opinion, has really missed the mark on usefulness across the 2 years of its lifespan. So I'm glad to see it not included here. I don't think it should be in this deck. But it does have the potential to do more than it used to. Like now that we have a full Nemesis environment, but still, I don't know. I don't think it's worth a slot. And Gifted Sight. Okay, so I guess when it was all said and done, I like all the picks that were made, and I think that a judgment call, and these are all judgment calls, right? Was just made between maybe a playstyle call between Conqueror Circlet and something like Enshrouded Shot. But so Conqueror Circlet could help you get to a position that might just be out of reach. However, I think more often than not, when you're managing things like feature tokens, then you're more worried about when I get to that feature token, can I make it a charge? Can I make an attack off of that position? And something like Enshrouded Shot opens that up. And also we have a range 1 fighter that could use the help. We could give this to anybody, but if we give it to a range 1 fighter, then it opens up what she can do for us as well. And we have great mobility with Shadow Ambush. So I think Enshrouded Shot over Conquer Circlet would be my recommendation for sure. So I'm going to tune that into place. And then Gambits real quick. I just want to see. I want to know one thing. I want to know if there's anything that says push. Yeah, nothing that's allowing us to push. This cannot be pushed. And specifically one's in enemy territory. Okay. So I feel pretty comfortable. I mean, like, I always want to sneak in a card like Zone of Control when I'm dealing with elves, especially on 2 dodge. Fighters are on guard while they're in starting hexes or on a feature token. This effect persists until the end of the round or until another domain gambit is played. I think this is incredible. Personally, and I'm not going to make the swap out here, if I was playing this deck, I would probably test having Zone of Control in over Grasping Rootgrave. I think Grasping Rootgrave, like, once it's been seen in the match, it's pretty manageable. So in like a best of 3, if I'm up against you and I know you have Grasping Rootgrave, I can probably kind of avoid most of the harm it's going to bring me. And if I'm playing hold or I want to sit on objectives anyways, then that's a spot that doesn't count. Like, so I'm making it so that you have to push me off of that spot. And sometimes you can do so with like really hardy fighters or fighters that are inherently on guard, or put a guard token on a fighter, stuff like that. Like there's ways to play around Grasping Rootgrave. So more so than I think there are ways to play around something like Zone of Control. Zone of Control does benefit both players in the same way that something like Grasping Rootgrave damages both players. It's because they're domains, right? Domains are meant to affect both sides of the battlefield in the same way, generally. So for me, I mean, Grasping Rootgrave is still good. Don't get me wrong. I just find when I see it across the table, I can usually manage it. I don't always expect it. So like that first game, it can really pull one over on me. But in a best of 3, or like if we're regular, league night partners, once I know it's in there, it's something I'm pretty okay with managing. Whereas if you were running Zone of Control, imagine how hard it would be to move you off of cover hexes. All of a sudden you're on 2 dodge, also with 2 shield, also with no drive back, also with the benefit from cover. Even if you delved, like at that point, like now delving's gonna give me a reroll and potentially a crit against you, but I'm pretty much gonna need crits to break through, because everything is stopping me from hitting you outside of single support. However, if you have Voidling on you, I can't touch you. Like your 2 dice are gonna roll successes unless I am bringing some sort of like ensnare or cleave or out critting you. And so I think Zone of Control has a ton of staying power, and it would be something I'd want to work into here. I don't know what I'd remove. I would probably be Grasping Rootgrave. Everything else I feel way too good about. I really like these picks. I think Andreas has a really, really fun deck here. So this is like my 11th card, and it would make it into mine over Grasping Rootgrave. But I'm not going to pull Grasping Rootgrave out. And then objectives. Let's take a look at objectives real quick. So we want to take a look and see what surges were left on the table. Uncovered secrets. Absolutely, we don't want that. Strike the head. Score this immediately after an enemy leader is taken out of action. Gross. No thank you. I don't want to have to... Like, that's a kill surge that requires that I haven't killed their leader yet. And so all of a sudden you're dissuaded from killing the leader, and you need to draw this when you can reach and take down the leader. No. Unseen Malice. Duel. Score this immediately after a friendly fighter used their Shadow Ambush ability, and that fighter's attack action took an enemy fighter out of action in the same activation. Oh, I like that a lot. What was it that we were trying to replace? We might... I mean, this could be tricky. Hold on. Terra Incognita. Score this immediately after an activation if a domain card is persisting. No, we've only got 1 domain. We don't have enough support for this. And 1 or more surviving friendly leaders and or explorers are not in your territory. Second part's easy. First part's hard. We're only rocking 1 domain. There are a lot of not very great domains in Daring Delvers. At least 2 more that I can think of off the top of my head. I mean, Zone of Control, banger. Yeah, Tangled Roots and Spirit Snare Cavern. These aren't very good. So we don't want to force ourselves to bring these for a bad surge when this Gambit deck is just absolutely rocking. Okay, so we were looking to replace Nowhere to Hide, maybe. The target was taken out of action, and the attacker and or the defender was in a cover hex. You know what? Between this or Shadow Ambush, I feel it's almost a toss-up because I'm going to lean on Andreas's experience here and say Nowhere to Hide is probably the choice that comes out on top. They're very similar cards in what they're asking. If you're shadow ambushing, there's a good chance that you're landing on a cover, in which case nowhere to hide is applicable. Shadow ambush also enables you to come out of edge hexes, though, which I think I like more. But you have so many cards in the deck. Well, not so many. You have two, but they're really good ones. Impenetrable Darkness and Ruthless Aim that can help you with nowhere to hide. I bet without a doubt this is the hardest surge in here for Andreas and in general. And I think I would put in Unseen Menace over it. Let's see. Or Unseen Malice. A friendly fighter used their Shadow Ambush ability, and that fighter's attack action took an enemy fighter out of action in the same activation. Yeah. Because, especially, like, if you longboard, then you have some pretty insane coverage. And Malleable, or I don't think the attack is called Malleable, the ability is. This Shadowstone weapons, though, like range 2 or 3 damage, you know, cleave and snare, being able to use that off of a shadow ambush. I think I like Unseen Malice more personally. The more I think about it. So yeah, let's make that swap. Because I think a lot of the time this is going to be true regardless. So or let me rephrase that. So like nowhere to hide, you have to like get one of the two fighters in a cover hex, right? Well, I feel like in the same ways that you're going to be benefited by being in a cover hex is going to be present when you're shadow ambushing, right? Like even if I had Impenetrable Darkness in play, that might enable me to shadow ambush to an edge hex. Whereas it doesn't enable me to. So yeah, here's the example. So I shadow ambush from anywhere, right? And let's say that one of my cool shadow counters is what made me able to shadow ambush. And the best spots to get to a target that I can take down are edge hexes. Well, then I can't score. I can't score nowhere to hide unless I do have that shadow counter. But even if I don't have that shadow counter, I could still score Unseen Malice off of that situation. Does that make sense? However, this is requiring me to have used it. Let's take a look. It's not so easy, is it? When this fighter starts a charge action. Starts a charge. Has to be a charge. Ooh, actually, I think that weighs in pretty heavily here. Because as you start losing fighters, then you're only going to have a couple opportunities, maybe even only one opportunity to score Unseen Malice in a round, but you might have more opportunities to score something like Nowhere to Hide. This is tough. I think Nowhere to Hide, I could go either way on these. I really like the ability to lean on Shadow Ambush as my Kill Surge enabler, whereas here it has to be a cover hex. So edge hexes aren't going to qualify unless I'm bringing a shadow counter along. Okay, let's stick to Nowhere to Hide, though, simply because of the fact that you have more attacks across a round that aren't limited by just charging. And you know what? This is strengthened by Enshrouded Shots inclusion. We can stay on a location that we've planted our feet on and have a wider range to take shots that could equal a Nowhere to Hide kill. Okay, so that's that. And then we were going to look at Prolonging the Inevitable as well. So what do we have for end phase here? Do we have a third end phase? I think we do, but I don't think we like it. All is Shadow. Scores in the third end phase if 2 or more friendly fighters are each in a cover hex or edge hex. So that's future proofed. Man, maybe they did do a good job future proofing this. I'm sorry for the assumptions early on that this wasn't future proofed. I mean, well done, you GW. I will retract my design notes. I'm sorry. And no friendly fighters are in your territory. So two or more friendly fighters are each in a cover hex or edge hex, and no friendly fighters are in your territory. For 3 points. Man, I know this is risky, and this is assuming that you can keep 2 fighters alive, and you cannot make that assumption. But Zone of Control is a card that could potentially enable you to stay alive a little longer. Just I really like Zone of Control. Man, I wanna toss into this deck, but I'm resisting the urge. I don't think it would enable all the Shadow. I think that is too risky. It's a great payoff for it. I like the card. I don't hate it. Yeah, end phase. Okay. So what else do we have here? So Umbral Raid. 2 or more friendly fighters are in enemy territory, and each of those fighters is within 2 hexes of 1 or more enemy fighters are in enemy territory, and each of those fighters is within. This is hard. This is really hard because of the 2 or more and then the each. So it's not like at least 2. So what it's saying is if I had 3 that were in enemy territory, then all 3 would have to be within 2 hexes of 1 or more enemy fighters. And sometimes this can be really difficult if you kill a fighter because all of a sudden that fighter is no longer there and you're no longer within 2. So especially if you have to manage this with more than 2 fighters. No, I think this is really difficult. I think that's properly not included. Claim Guardians, 2 or more surviving friendly fighters are each holding an objective, and your exploration count is 5 or more. No, because of how much we're leaning into cover, so that makes sense. Sleepless Sentries, this could be it. Scores in an end phase if each enemy fighter is within 2 hexes of 1 or more friendly fighters. Personally, I like this better. This can be really tough, and you do have to manage your positions against. Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm trying to think. So we have so much that's pulling us into cover positions already that we don't want another thing pulling us away from those positions, and we don't have enough pushes, to tricks to kind of make both situations true when at like a given notice. So I think Sleepless Sentries might have to stay out. And then we're down into 1-pointers. So, are we willing to bring this deck down to 16 glory? Savor the Kill, score this in an end phase if 1 or more enemy fighters are vulnerable. No, I'd rather go for the stretch goal of being next to him if that was the case. Score this in an end phase if friendly leader is in a cover hex or lethal hex, and that leader is in enemy territory. This demands too much of our leader, especially for 1. Fearless Explorer, 2 or more domains. Nope. Wait, this is an or. Or your exploration count is 5 or more. Maybe. I would say this is a strong contender if you play this deck a bunch and you realize that prolonging the inevitable is too difficult. And Survivalist. Score this in end phase if each friendly fighter has 1 or more upgrades and or is in a cover hex or on a feature token. No, this is it. It's not Fearless Explorer. It's this. So I think if you're willing to drop prolonging the inevitable for a 1-pointer, you put Survivalist in. You could try Sleepless Sentries, but I do think you will run into too much push and pull on where your positioning should be. So prolonging the inevitable might just need to stick around. I do not like this card. But if you go second, it's much more achievable. There's a lot of risk with keeping vulnerable fighters around and then also choosing to be adjacent to them. So I think this deck is great as is, though. So we're going to seal of approval, put a stamp on it. Pick a name out for it. There wasn't a name included in the submission. I did not see the email in time to reach back out and ask if there was a name in mind. So we'll be creative today and toss a name on this deck for Andreas. And maybe Andreas will adopt it. Or maybe they've already got a banger name picked out for themselves. So part of me wants to focus on the fact that it's the root maze. It's kind of where I'm coming from initially here. And I mean, that could be as simple as something like root maze shadows. Or I don't know if the rootborn really makes sense, like the rootborn shades. Rootborn shades. No, I kind of like the idea of them stalking the darkness of the maze. So like root maze stalkers doesn't have enough of their name. In fact, it would be pretty easy to assume that this was a Daring Delver's Starblood Stalkers deck, so we can't do that. Root maze shades. Sure. We're going to call this the root maze shades. Yeah, I think I like it. All right, so let's get that tossed in here. Root maze shades. Shadows? Should I do shadows? I think I like shades more than shadows in this case. We're referring to the fighters. I mean, it's cool to refer to fighters as shadows, but they are the Shadeborn. We'll do shades. All right. So with that, we're going to wrap up the episode. Sorry again for the interruption earlier. Thanks for bearing with me. And next week is going to be week A. So it's going to be a fresh build from the ground up once again. And it's going to start with a battle report, or field report, for the Stampede of the Void Bellow. So that is the last episode that we had together, session we had together, where we built Grash Racks to Spoilers with Voidcurse Thralls. And I have not actually tested the deck at this time, so I've got plenty of testing to do between now and next week. But I do know that the requester has indeed tested the deck out, Caiaphas Kane, and has found success and enjoyment with it. Wrote in to let me know how much fun they were having and that the deck was working well. And that's exciting. So we will definitely start next show with that. And in the meantime, I'll be trying that deck out myself. Might be trying to steal some moments to try this deck out as well. So feel free to give either decks, attempts. If you do, let me know how they go. I'd love to hear, if you ever test one of the decks that I do field reports on. So the builds, the fresh builds, and you want me to include your experience in my notes, reach out. Even reaching out is pretty much going to inherently make me want to include your notes, because I'd love to hear about your experiences with the decks that we've built. So you can see the deck that we worked on today, Root Maze Shades by Andreas. I had to look up. I'm not always the best with names, and I wanted to see if I couldn't pronounce that as close to accurate as well, or I could. So I actually looked up pronunciation ahead of today's episode. But you can see this deck and many more at the Battle Mallets Nemesis Library. You can best reach me in the comments below or on the Mortal Realms Discord. You can check out all the Mortal Realms has to offer, including a link to our Discord at themortalrealms.com. Thank you for watching. Hope to see you next week. I've been Skylar, and this has been What the Decks.